So, I was pointed to, well, a mess of a video, really. Perhaps some of you will recognize this guy once I start the video up. As always, a link will be in the description to see the original full version, and I will include everything I think is necessary for context. So, why don't we just jump right into this one?
Alright guys, so an impromptu video here, but people have asked me to talk about this because I put a thing up on Twitter about it, and squeaky chair. So USA9 in America has put out, oh my god, DEFCON 12, major breaking news. White supremacy is a wash on college campuses, don't you know?
USA9, you say? I can't say I'm familiar with that, so let's take a look. That appears to be a legitimate news station from what little I can tell glancing at their site. Of course, they're a Washington, D.C. station, not something broadcast throughout the country, so it's not really a surprise I haven't heard of them in southern Illinois. So they look legit, but unfortunately I can't really get the information I usually would on their biases or their tendency to report things factually. This is the result for WUSA9, while more specific searches oddly bring up pages of unrelated results. I suppose this is all probably fairly irrelevant for the moment, other than showing this apparently isn't that commonly relied upon as a source. Go on.
Not true. Actually, the opposite. Hatred of white people is mainstream, it seems, in the media, in academia, in entertainment, in the workplace. Right?
Perhaps it is in some places. Certainly I hear plenty of insistence this is the case absolutely everywhere. I wouldn't mind seeing something indicating how prevalent it really is, or what part of each of these areas has these issues. But while we're dealing with anecdotes and examples, I haven't seen any of it. I happen to be white, though a woman, so likely viewed as more oppressed by those you appear to think control things, and less so by you and those you appear to agree with. I've lived in 3 states, all far more toward the middle of the country than anywhere most of the examples usually come from. And within those states, I've lived in 5 different cities or towns, each located in a different county, or in one case, no county at all. I've also recently been on a trip to part of Florida. Not once have I dealt with any kind of hatred based on my skin color. I've had some issues because of my economic status, what brand of supernatural nonsense I was interested in at one time, and even what I was or was not able to readily do, but never because I was white. I haven't even witnessed anybody making racist remarks or the like towards white people if we're discussing in person only. I can't actually say the same thing when it comes to some other demographics, though. Of course, none of this actually means that it doesn't happen to people. I'm sure it does. It just makes it a little hard to agree that it's mainstream. After all, something mainstream is, by definition, normal and accepted. Hatred toward white people is neither anywhere I've spent enough time to know about. Then goes on to list some measures meant to counter perceived discrimination, and mentions having covered it ad nauseum before. I won't get too far into them right now, though I will say that whether any given program, or even the idea of the programs, is beneficial is a worthwhile discussion to have. Reasonably. Engaging the actual arguments for or against, not straw men or extremist examples. Then it goes on to the motives of, as he called it, the liberal media. Again, not what I'm interested in here. Nor am I interested in arguing about the various examples provided, especially as I would have to look into every single one. But even if I granted, just for the sake of this discussion, not that I really agree, that every single example mentioned was legitimate, and even if I also granted, whether I agree with it or not, that some untold number more examples could be found, and that the mention of it being everywhere was hyperbolic, all of this still would not show that it was normal, that it was accepted, that it was mainstream. No more than showing examples of crime makes crime a mainstream activity or career path. And it also has little to do with the incident here, other than perhaps showing the background of why things occurred the way they did.
We live in a time where it's totally okay for, a black person, and it should be, as it should be, for a black person to walk down the street with a t-shirt saying Black and Proud, or Black Lives Matter, something like that. Or an Asian person to do the same with Asian and Proud, what have you. But if a white person does that, they're a neo-Nazi or whatever.
So, I don't entirely disagree here. If I were looking around from the outside, even at the so-called mainstream media sources, let alone the alternatives with their usually very different slants, I'd see that as the case as well. And certainly any of the above should be able to wear something like that. Who cares? But, unfortunately, words do convey meanings. Meanings that often go beyond even the sum of the definitions of the words themselves. And even when they don't, things can be misinterpreted. And actually, because of what words can come to mean from their use, the area that I live in now and the one I used to live in would both be pretty hostile towards a black person with a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Because of the protest movement and what it's known for, many people would take that statement as something far more than stating their life matters. Even to the point of seeing it as anti-police, having a victim mentality, supporting terrorism, though they might not label it as such, and/or hating white people. And similarly, explicitly pro-right statements often get assumed to be supporting white supremacy, even though neither one's necessarily the case. But here in the US, all of the above would still be allowed. It is completely legal to wear a shirt saying any of those things, regardless of how people may take them. And that's as it should be, at least in my opinion. But that doesn't mean, and it shouldn't mean, that people won't say anything about any of them. It doesn't even mean that won't influence how people interact with somebody wearing one of those shirts. It just means that they're allowed to do it.
Leftists are always banging on about how there's institutional racism and how somehow the game is rigged against everyone else who isn't white. But the reality is what they've actually done with social justice and all these programs is that they have introduced institutional biases and racism, but it's against white people. And so obviously you're going to have the development of a movement that advocates on behalf of white people. And it's not in the interests of white supremacy, it's actually in the interests of, once again, leveling the playing field so it goes back down to being about merit, the best person for the job, the best person who gets the scholarship in college or whatever it might be.
If it is genuinely an attempt to go back to a merit-based system, and the programs are a problem in and of themselves, not merely need to be modified to offer the correct proportion to white people, why on earth would anyone start advocating on behalf of white people? You don't remove something by trying to create it all over again for another group. If people are trying to argue against the removal of biases in favor of other groups, which is what is really being discussed here, it's not a policy that says if a person is a straight white male, exclude them, but one that can be argued to have similar impact by allegedly giving undue consideration if the person is part of any other demographic. Then do that. Argue that case. That's a discussion worth having, and one that may have some surprising sources of agreement. But it's not the discussion that started by arguing that straight, white, cisgender men without any disabilities are the real oppressed group in society that needs advocacy.
So this is an absolutely extraordinary story which should go viral everywhere. USA9 has taken the bait, which was put out there, I believe, on, might have been 4chan or some social network like that, but obviously, the people who engaged and ran this program, basically there's some flyers that were put up around a college, they knew what they were doing, and their intention was clear. Their intention was to highlight just how racist against white people the mainstream media are. So let's have a look at this.
So, real quick before we watch, what you're saying here is that some network, probably one such as 4chan, which is known for working as a hub for organizing trolls, created some kind of flyer to highlight just how allegedly racist against white people the so-called mainstream media is. They then put up these flyers, which are, by your own and as you later show, their own admission, clearly intended to cause a particular reaction. Clearly deliberate emotional manipulation. Admittedly, an effort at creating propaganda. Then a single TV news station for the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area picked up the story. And because you found here one single news station that is so rarely cited it doesn't even have an entry in a fact checker that reacted in a way remotely like they expected, that reaction should go viral and proves the point of the obvious and admitted trolls clearly attempting to create propaganda. Do I have that about right? But yeah, let's watch this.
The news at 11 continues with a disturbing story out of Montgomery County.
Oh my god, a disturbing story, dramatic music. Oh my god, this is serious. What could it possibly be?
Students found flyers taped up at a high school that say...
Flyers? Oh my god, what do these flyers say?
It's okay to be white.
I'm not seeing a problem. It's okay to be white. I mean, if it was, it's okay to be black, or... Oh yeah, Dave, whoa. It's okay to be white is different from it's okay to be black, or it's okay to be Latino or Asian. It's okay to be white has connotations, you know. I mean, because all white people are guilty of slavery, even though more people fought to end slavery than ever engaged in it. But, you know, that's neither here nor there, Dave, okay? I mean, whites by their nature, this... Yeah. If you believe those kind of things, by the way, you've been watching television far too much. Stop watching the mainstream media.
Maybe you should take your own advice there. I was going to leave the ridicule of this overreaction uninterrupted. Unfortunately, it went straight from that into likely straw man territory in your perceived opposition, and then that suggestion. Funny thing is that you, as with most people that I hear tell people not to consume the so-called mainstream media, appear to be taking a handful of sources and letting them get you not only worked up, but convinced that everyone is out to get you. You know, the same thing you claim they're doing to at least some group of those who disagree with you. Projection much?
And now there are some racist online threats connected to them. Here's Stephanie Ramirez.
Here's what's going on. Yesterday, these flyers were posted to at least 2 different locations, the University of Maryland and Montgomery Blair High School in Silver Spring. The high school even caught the poster on surveillance video.
The best thing that they could have done here is not report on this story, and you're about to see why.
When I asked the school spokesperson what was going on, he sent me a web link to an older post that shows this was planned.
Well, of course it was planned. I mean, someone had to type up the thing and plan to stick it somewhere. But yes, there is actually a story behind this.
The page even says what to write. Oh, and the post also says this.
Right. So this is the reason why you... Okay, I'll just play it.
We expect the anti-white media to produce a storm about these racist, hateful, bigoted flyers with a completely innocuous message. The media response will rally new support for pro-white activism.
Yeah, so just reading that again. We expect the anti-white media, of which these guys are obviously a part because they're making a big deal about it's okay to be white. Oh my god, heaven forfend. We expect the anti-white media to produce a shitstorm about these racist, hateful, bigoted flyers, right? And the thing is, they put out bait, you proved them correct, they were able to play you, and here's the thing, that fair enough, you took the bait, right? I expect you to. The mainstream media, not that bright. But you are admitting that you took the bait. What the hell? It's just unbelievable. Right, with a completely innocuous message. And
Okay, enough of that. I get it. You find it hilarious that this one individual news station took the bait. And fair enough, that is pretty funny. But here you're going on and on like everyone is going to treat the whole world like an unfortunately large number think the internet must be treated. I mean, you've taken the concept of don't feed the trolls, which doesn't even really work on anything larger than an individual level online. The trolls just look for new targets or ramp up their attempts. And then you've applied it to the physical world, to a meat space scenario, and even to news reporting. The fact that something is clearly trolling doesn't mean it's going to be ignored and treated like it's harmless. It doesn't even mean that it is harmless, even if this particular instance probably was. And on top of that, you've just taken a source that may or may not be mainstream even in its small area, and treated it like it's every source for the entire giant country it's from. The entire mainstream media. But there's something else that I have to address.
The high school's principal says this was posted to 10 exterior doors to the school and that this appears to be a concentrated effort to foment racial and political tension.
No, okay, the opposite is actually true. That has already been fomented by the mainstream media, all right? That's been fomented by you already, okay, by supporting Black Lives Matter and all of these identity politics movements and Antifa and everything else.
Actually, that's not at all evidence that the opposite is true. The opposite would be an attempt to prevent or calm such tensions. Whether another individual or group is guilty of the same thing or not has absolutely no bearing on if that's what was being done here. Hypocrisy does not reduce factuality. Furthermore, by the very admissions you have made and shown, this is what was being done. This was very clearly a calculated effort to stir up a particular response. By the same admissions, the response that was intended was one that involves racism. It's actually very clearly an attempt to take an already volatile situation in society and make it explode, albeit for the stated purpose of proving how bad a particular group is.
You want to end racism, it helps if you stop talking about it and stop obsessing about it. And it definitely helps if everybody is treated genuinely equally. So affirmative action has got to go.
Where in the entire history of civilization has a problem been ended by people ceasing to talk about it? Yes, everybody being treated equally in whatever context discrimination is to be removed from is necessary. And to that end, again, whether a program is beneficial or harmful is well worth talking about, and affirmative action is no exception here. But that doesn't get done by pretending there's nothing to talk about, and it doesn't get done by flipping things around and pulling the same kinds of nonsense you're allegedly fighting, then saying you're doing nothing wrong because someone else did it too. But while we're looking at hypocrisy and double standards in what might have been the ultimate form of irony, let's replay what he just said there.
You want to end racism, it helps if you stop talking about it and stop obsessing about it.
And then let's look at how he ended his video, after some discussion about the comments and the mainstream media again.
Sadly, we live in a society where we judge not on the content of a person's character, but on the color of their skin. Anyway, thanks for watching.
So, which is it, Dave? Do we end racism by not talking about it, or do we talk about how society judges based on the color of a person's skin? Thanks for hearing me out. As always, civil discussion, suggestions, and constructive criticism are welcome in the comments or via social media. Feel free to rate, comment, and share. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe and click the bell for notifications, and check out the description for any sources that I've used.